I always wanted to be a writer. From the time that I was a child, I dreamed about going off to New York and writing the great American novel, living the life of a writer. I kept that vision throughout my childhood, up until the time I went to college and thought, is that really what I want to do? Shouldn't I do something more in the world to help change the world in some fashion? This was on my mind because I had integrated our school district back in East Texas, and I knew that lawyers were at the forefront of that struggle, and it made it happen. And I thought, law should be the profession that I should go into. I was a good student, I did well, I could go to law school, and I could make significant changes in the world. So, I put away my dream of being a novelist, of being a great American novelist, and I came to Harvard Law School. And I learned to be a lawyer, I learned to think like a lawyer. I took the bar exam, became a lawyer, started practicing for a number of years, and it was enjoyable, but something was missing for me. I knew that there was something in the background that was making me unsatisfied about my life until that moment. And one morning, I opened the newspaper, one Sunday morning, I opened the newspaper and saw an op-ed by a person that I'd gone to law school with. And I was thunderstruck. How could this person have a piece published anywhere? And I was consumed with envy. I know envy is a bad emotion. It's one of the 7 deadly sins, but I will confess to feeling it. And I was consumed by it, actually. And it's a bad thing, but it was a good thing in the sense that it told me what was missing. I really, really wanted to try to express myself in writing in the way that writers do. Not writing for someone else, but writing for my own self and my own ideas, my own way of making my mark in the world. And so I started writing again. I tried publishing book reviews. I tried doing a book about W.E.B. Du Bois. It was not accepted any place. It's sitting in my closet right now. I actually might pull it out and see what happens. And it was fulfilling to me, but I wasn't getting where I wanted to go. And then one evening I had the great fortune to go see James Baldwin, who was my idol of all time, in New York, speaking in New York. And as I was standing in the line, having him sign my book, I was sort of telling him everything a mile a minute, explaining everything, that how I'd wanted to be a writer. And I said, it's too late. And he said, it's never too late. And that was what I needed to make me go on and continue writing. I had my first opportunity, my real opportunity to make a mark, reading another newspaper article. Newspapers are a theme here. When I saw that they were going to be doing a movie about Jefferson called Jefferson in Paris, and the movie was going to treat the story of Jefferson's 38-year liaison with an enslaved woman, Sally Hemings, as the truth, and people were outraged by this. People said Jefferson would never be involved with the slave girl. There's no evidence that this happened. Well, as Mary mentioned, I had been a Jefferson buff along with my writing buff for a very, very long time, and I knew that there was evidence. There may not be proof, but the words of African Americans who talked about this, I thought was evidence, and it should be treated like evidence. And this notion of a slave girl, as if every African American woman from 1619 to 1865 was exactly the same person, a sort of stereotype of an enslaved person. And I thought, that's wrong. So I sat down to write an op-ed that got longer and longer and longer, and finally I said, you have this eccentric interest in Monticello, you should write a book. And you should write a book about the way historians have treated this story. Very often I noticed that they invoked the law and legal standards to sort of bolster their claim. If this were a court of law, the burden of proof, all this kind of thing, evidence, witnesses. And I said, I can play this game, I'm a law professor. You're a historian doing this, I can play it, let's play. And I wrote my first book, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, An American Controversy, came out in 1997, and I said this story is likely true. And the next year, DNA testing on Jefferson descendants and others corroborated everything that I'd said in my book. And that was gratifying. I liked that. But I knew that that was not the end of the story. One of the reasons that it was so easy for historians to dismiss and for many Americans to believe what the historians were saying about the Hemings story was that they didn't know anything about the Hemingses. They didn't know Sally Hemings as an individual. She was an enslaved girl. And I thought, I should do something different. I should make people know these people in a way that would make it difficult for their story to be dismissed. People could also not imagine how this could have happened because they could not imagine her or her family. And so I set out to write the Hemingses of Monticello around 2000, 2001. This is an interesting day for me because I actually lived across the street from the World Trade Towers, and they fell into my apartment with all of my research and all of my work. But I continued working after 2001 on this piece, on this work that turned into an 800-page, 130 pages of footnotes, 700 pages of text, working steadily for years to try to bring the Hemings family alive for readers, because I think that it's so important that this be done, that this notion that enslaved people were individuals. They went through slavery as a group, but they were individual people, and there's many different types of enslaved people as there are in this room or as there are in the world. And that's what I wanted the Hemingses of Monticello to do. I finished the book, and one of the most gratifying things to me was after a talk that I gave, a man came up to me and said, you know, when I was reading this story about Sally Hemings crossing the Atlantic to go to France to meet Jefferson and her brother in Paris, I thought about my grandmother, who was 16 years old, who came to this country from Italy as an immigrant, not speaking the language or anything, and I thought, aha, that's great. The difference between an enslaved girl from the 18th century and a 19th century Italian girl coming to America, the differences are great. Cultural, language, everything. But there was one thing that was similar, and that's the humanity. Seeing a person alone, seeing a person in difficult circumstances, in strange circumstances, he got it. And that made me feel that I had done well. And there have been many moments since that time. The people who are writing plays, novels, someone has started a Hemings Foundation for James Hemings, who Jefferson took to France to learn how to be a French chef. All those little bits of things, the sort of ripples that have come from this work, where I was trying, as I said, to make these people live for Americans in a way that would make them never be the subject of disdain, never be dismissed again. And it's wonderful when I go to Monticello now, as I'm going to do on Saturday. There's a summit on slavery and the legacy of slavery and race in America at Monticello this coming Saturday. And whenever I go there, it is especially gratifying to me to go to the visitor center and see the Hemings family tree, a large Hemings family tree, and Jefferson is on it as the father of Sally Hemings' children. So I think that I was wrong when I thought that if I remained as a writer, I would not be able to change the world in any way. I think I've had the opportunity to change the way the world thinks about a very, very important man and the way people think about the subject of slavery. And the icing on the cake for me is that the Pulitzer Prize board recognized what I'd done, and that was a great privilege, and it was a great honor. And so I'm very, very happy to be here today and to share this with you. And let's have a good time.